Good afternoon or good morning, everybody, wherever this webinar finds you today. We hope that you are safe. And if you are sheltering in place at home, you have not inflicted violence on any family members. Yeet and I are aspiring to do the same. And with every passing day, that becomes a bit more challenging. We really appreciate your taking the time to join us today here. It's so great to see so many of you who we already have relationships, and those of you who we haven't had the opportunity to meet in person before, joining us for this webinar. A couple of housekeeping items before we actually jump into the material. The first of which is that this webinar is being recorded, and we will post the video on the TimeLooper website later this afternoon, along with the actual presentation. There are a series of links and products and tools that we will refer to throughout the presentation. And rather than asking you to distract yourselves with writing down notes as we go through, you might be better off simply focusing on the present on the presentation and then worrying about getting access to those links later through the PDF that you can get from our website. Additionally, there is a Q&A button in the black toolbar for those of you who have never participated in a Zoom webinar before. Feel free to ask questions as they arise. Yeet and I, and Nick, who's also on this call, Nick and I will do our best to address those questions as we're going through the presentation. We have designed this webinar to include about 40 to 45 minutes of material, which means that we should have enough time to answer all of your questions as we move through the presentation. If the number of questions becomes sufficiently overwhelming that we fear that we're going to bump up on the 1 o'clock hour, we might defer some of those questions to the end. We will stay on the webinar as long as necessary to answer everybody's questions, but we want to ensure that all of the material and ground that we want to cover does get covered in the hour that has been allotted for our time together. So with that, we will jump in. The name of this webinar today is Starting Up Virtual Tours Quickly. If you are looking for yoga or mindfulness webinars, those are likely to be somewhere else in your inbox. Today, we're going to be focusing on how to bring your institution, your museum, your heritage site, your public land online in a digital manner quickly. So that way your doors, which are currently closed, can be reopened for impact. And you can continue to have and build relationships with your community, albeit digitally, in these times when social distancing is imperative. The two main presenters today are going to be Yeet and me. Many of you have met one of us before, but for those of you who haven't, it's nice to meet you virtually. And we are also joined on this webinar by our colleague, Nick. And as we move into the actual material for the presentation, we think that it's probably helpful to actually align definitionally around what VR is. So as you know, there are many definitions out there. Nobody can really align on it. And so we wanted to engage in a brief level setting to ensure that as we move into the tools and the tricks on how you can actually produce these VR tours quickly, we are all sort of starting from the same place. So really, what VR is to us here at TimeLooper is it is the application of a technology that allows the user to be in an environment other than their own. And it is presented in such a way that it immerses them in that environment. So for those people who are stuck at home today and they're encouraged to not leave their houses, any sort of experience where you take somebody and you put them in a fully immersive way anywhere else, whether it is another place as it looks today, or in the future or in the past, is virtual reality. There are many more technical and complicated definitions that flush out some level of contention amongst various factions. But for all of us today on this call, we're simply going to call any immersive visual experience that we're going to talk about as virtual reality. There are two ways to build virtual experiences. The first way is to take people to another place that presently exists. So if you want to take somebody to your museum, to a park, anywhere around the planet where we can capture that environment with a photo or a video or even a 3D scan, and we don't need to do any additional work to it, is what we would call present day immersion. But if you want to take your user back to the Cretaceous period, if you want to take them to Valley Forge and have them sit with General Washington, or if you want to take them into the future where they can see the impacts of climate change on your local community, it would be insufficient and ineffective to simply take photos, videos, and scans of the present day environment. Instead, what we would need to do is we would have to focus on developing new visual cues to help people experience worlds that don't exist. So this is where interpretation, visual interpretation, would become quite important, whether relying on primary sources or scans or artifacts or 3D or scientific modeling in the case of climate change, etc. So we're going to spend most of our time today talking about these two forms of immersion. But before we move further into the presentation, for those of you who've actually never experienced VR before, and because we're here virtually, I can't ask you to answer that question. For those of you who've never experienced VR before, I'm actually going to pass it over to Yeet so that way he can help all of us visualize what these two forms of immersion look like. Yeet, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm joining this call via my iPad, and now I'm going to share my screen and then turn around myself. As I turn, my view will change, and I'm going to see a different part of the 360 content. And it's kind of is going to look like this. As I move, then the view is changing. So now let me share my screen. Right. So what you are seeing is the view from the top of Washington Monument. Some of you have already seen this. I've showed it in person. This would be considered as a present time 360 picture of a current environment. This picture was taken during the time when Washington Monument was closed, and the National Park Service asked us to show the view from the top, given that people cannot go up. And then, but also they said, when we go up, we talk about the history of Washington, D.C., and we created a computer-generated content of different time periods. And now I'm going to show that example. So the landscape is going to change. Again, everything is in 360 degrees, but the next image is computer-generated content.
Thank you, Yeet. And what Yeet showed you were, of course, two different visual approaches. And these visual approaches, in and of themselves, are a neat sort of tool. But for the purposes of many of our institutional partners, it's not enough to help people see another environment. I think really what we're all after is impact, education, and education, whether that's knowledge transfer, seeking to generate an emotional response to a particular issue, providing additional context around stories that are relevant to your institution. And so with that, virtual reality is a really wonderful tool to help enhance those goals. A famous virtual reality content producer once referred to VR as the empathy machine, because once you're really inside of these environments, it really does unlock a series of tools that allow you to convey complicated, nuanced stories and experiences to your visitor in such a way that it can really enhance their overall experience. And it's also important to understand that, when you think about everybody at home today, it's not just about having them put on a high-end headset. I think that for us, definitionally, virtual reality can be consumed in any number of devices. Would it be nice if everybody had a $200 Oculus Go headset at home? Of course it would. However, we can't let perfect be the enemy of the good, particularly in this environment where everybody is doing what they can to make best of the situation. Anybody who has access to a smartphone, anybody who has access to a tablet now has access to immersive virtual content. Even those individuals who have a smartphone and who have a $2 Google Cardboard at home then have an even more immersive virtual reality experience. So I think the point that we really want to hit home on here is that virtual reality can be consumed utilizing these very simple visual techniques with the technology that your key stakeholders and your member community already have in place today. So with that in mind, I think that it's worth considering how to actually, the basics of VR content development and publishing. And that really comes in a couple of different forms. So the first of which is actually capturing a piece of content. And then from there, you would be publishing that piece of content. So how do you capture this content? Well, if we're going to start with the most simple form of visual interpretation, which is either a 360-degree picture, like the top of the Washington Monument, or a 360-degree video, we would recommend buying consumer-grade equipment. For most of your institutions, the hardware that's available out there in the market now is available for about $200 to $300 for up to $600 or $700 and will more than meet your needs. So the Insta360 One X, the Ricoh Theta 5, and the Garmin Verb are all less than $700, and you can order any of them on Amazon today, and it will be to your front door in 48 hours. And then you could simply link it to your smartphone and then capture this content and then upload it. And then it's that simple, and you have published online. So what does it look like to publish online? Well, if you're publishing a 360-degree photo, I'll show you an example from the Guggenheim Museum in New York City. So here is the Guggenheim, and this is for those of you who haven't been. This is an art museum on Fifth Avenue. This particular example I'm going to show you is a series of 360-degree photos that are stitched together. So you can actually take 360-degree photos just like this and then seamlessly build this VR tour on Google's platform and then upload it for everybody and anybody to consume by desktop. All they have to do is click on the X's, and each of these X points are different places inside of the institution where you'll take photographs, and then it allows these individuals to have a 360-degree view. So again, all you have to do is buy one of those $200 or $300 cameras, take these photos around the physical infrastructure of your museum, load them up to Google's website, and then individuals can take a physical tour through your institution. Now, if you want to enhance the level of interpretation, there are a couple of different ways you can do that. One way that we find that is quite powerful is to take a 360-degree video. So if you are a historic site like the Halifax Citadel, for example, what I would recommend you do is you take one of your educational specialists or even your living historians, and you embed them in the foreground, and then they provide a voiceover while they're moving through the physical environment. So this example that I'm going to show you now is from inside of Thomas Edison National Historic Park. And what you will see is a National Park Service ranger giving a talk directly to people who are consuming this 360-degree content on YouTube 360. So in this particular instance, you would take your 360 camera, you would place it in the middle of the room, and your interpretive specialist would speak to the different visual cues that are available on the video. And then you would simply upload this video to YouTube 360. It's that simple. And now you have a VR experience with interpretation that you've captured in 5 minutes, uploaded 10 minutes later, and you can use all of your marketing channels to push it out to everybody at home. So here's what that looks like.
It's a National Historical Park. I'm glad you can join me here in Edison's library, or some refer to it as his office. He spent a lot of time here in West Orange, arrived here in 1887, spent the rest of his life till he passed away in 1931. He did a lot of work here at his desk, and as you take a look at it, you can see there's a lot of papers, a lot of books. His library had over 10,000 volumes.
Again, very simple to do. And the benefit of doing this is that your interpretive specialist, your education team, know the content like the back of their hand. So you could ask your interpretive specialist to stand in front of the camera, and depending upon the nature of the interpretive journey that you want to create, just ask them to talk, and within a couple of minutes, you have the piece of content. We recommend for 360 video, keeping the actual video content to 3 minutes or fewer. After that, people tend to get content fatigue in today's day and age. So whether it's a 360-degree picture or a 360-degree video, what we would recommend is that you utilize all of the free publication platforms that are out there, and then use your social channels to promote them. YouTube 360 and Facebook both have, great 360-degree camera players where it's easy to upload content. One of the benefits of YouTube 360 is that if people have the YouTube app on their smartphone, it's easy to put it into cardboard headset mode, where when they rotate their phone, they can put it into a Google Cardboard style headset viewer. But then there's also, Vimeo, which is a great VR platform. And then for those of you who are more ambitious and want to make content available on higher end pieces of hardware, there's also the Oculus Store and the Gear VR Store. Again, all of this is free. The only cost of entry here is purchasing the actual camera. Now, if you want to take these pieces of VR content, how would you think about actually producing it? So for each of you, you might want to think differently, because the nature of your environment is unique, and why people are coming to your space. People might come to a public land for a very different reason than they might go to a historic site or to a museum. For example, if you're going to go to a museum, you might want to think about creating VR content that allow people to explore the park. If your park is a controlled environment with endangered, species, then you could actually, capture VR content that allows the user to get up close and personal with to these specific species without actually endangering them. Alternatively, you could create VR content that visualizes alternate seasons. Now you would say, Andrew, how am I going to create VR content, with alternate seasons? It's April 1st tomorrow, and I want to get something out quickly. Well, one of the things that you can do, especially if you have a well-trafficked site where people tend to take lots of photographs, is go out to social media and put out a call to your community to see if people have this content already available. Somebody might have taken a great 360-degree photo, October 15th at the peak of foliage season, or somebody might have taken a VR video. One of your interpretive specialists might have taken a VR video last spring if it was mating season, et cetera, et cetera. For historic sites, people tend to want to go to these sites to connect with history, to feel the grandeur of what made that place important, and engage with historically important artifacts. So you might want to think about spending time, like we did at Edison's, in Edison's video, explaining the importance of these places and describing why they matter, the symbolism of the objects that are in these locations, and why you have presented them there in that way. Basically taking the information that you tend to convey through on-site interpretive engagement and through interpretive panels and delivering those to visitors in a way that allow them to get a better appreciation of your site. And then, of course, if you're a museum, one of the best things about VR is that, with your camera, you can control delicate situations. You can actually get behind the casings and allow people to explore collections. More so for historic sites and museums, you can also deploy a technology called photogrammetry. Photogrammetry is a very straightforward approach where you would use your camera, take lots of photos from different angles of a specific object, whether it is a book or it is a 10,000-year-old piece of pottery, whatever it may be. You can take many different photos of that object, and then you can basically publish them to a photogrammetry software tool, some of which are web-based, and then it will create an augmented reality model. We'll talk about why those might be useful in a minute. But you can also think about giving people access to 3D objects inside of your institution without having to go and buy expensive hardware. But I think the overriding sentiment that we here at TimeLooper have is for all of you to try something, right? So people are stuck at home, they're detached from community. You provide that connective tissue. People are affording, they're providing generosity to anybody out there who's trying to help. And so if you haven't done this before, now's a great time to start quickly and take an interpretive approach and deploy it and see what happens. And then learn from your community's feedback. But no matter what you do, we would also recommend that you start from a place of strength. So you know the programming that you deliver on site. You know that in March, April, you might get 20,000, 30,000, 30,000 students coming through the doors of your institution for a spring field trip, and you're going to deliver the same interpretive program over and over and over. You already have that interpretive program developed. Think about how you can translate that interpretive program to a virtual environment rather than thinking about creating a new interpretive program from scratch. The trick will be in thinking about how to translate that on-site interpretive and engagement experience into something that can be scaled and is portable. And if you need help thinking that through, feel free to reach out to us. It's what we do for a living, but I'm pretty sure that most of you will be able to get pretty far on your own. Once you have really identified what that interpretive journey is, then the trick becomes how you can deploy that inside of VR. And so one case one tool that we showed was putting the interpretive ranger in front of a 360-degree video, but there are a couple of other different ways as well. So our favorite is to take a 360-degree photo and then to make it interactive, where the user can actually engage with different objects and elements and component pieces inside of your environment. Another way is to take a 360-degree video like we have from today, and then to turn it into a 360-degree movie where we utilize computer-generated imagery to change that environment and thereby enhance people's understandings of the interpretive concepts that you're conveying. I'm now gonna, pass the digital microphone back to Yeet and allow him to show you a couple of different examples of 360-degree interactive photos and 360-degree movies.
Right. I'm sharing my screen again from my iPad. The first example is an outdoor example, East Bay Regional Parks. East Bay Regional Parks took this 360-degree pictures and then sent it to us. So, and then how can you make in an outdoor picture, any physical environment, more meaningful, more intuitive for the audience? Here's their technique. So after sending this 360 degrees picture, they highlighted point of interest in this picture and then send us the assets, and then we integrate it, and here's the output.
Pleasanton Ridge Regional Park's open space protects land that is vital for the plants and animals who make a home on these hillsides. Bountiful wildflowers can be found here in springtime, while bobcats, coyotes, hawks, and eagles roam the land year-round. However,
Another example, let's say that you have a museum. It's an indoor experience. And this example is from Washington, D.C., Ford's Theater. The Ford's Theater was, Peterson House is right across the street from Ford's Theater. This is where Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and then he was moved to this house, and then that's where he died. And when you go inside, you look at the rooms, and then the interpretive content is the accounts of people who were there on that day. So what we did was we want that, and we simply took 360 picture of the room, and then we know who was in which room, and then we just put portraits of those people, and then when you select them, they tell you what
I inquired where Miss Lincoln was and was informed that she was in the front parlor. I entered the parlor and found her there entirely alone. She was standing by a marble-top table in the center of...
After the president died, Dr. Gurley went to Mrs. Lincoln and told her, "The president is dead." "Oh, why did you not let me know?"
"Why did you not come to me last night, Elizabeth? I sent for you," Mrs. Lincoln asked in a low whisper.
So this is the story of the house and of the people, but of course, this also can be about the objects inside the museum that you highlight and then talk about them. And now a more complicated storytelling technique is from New York and Federal Hall. So Federal Hall is in downtown New York, right next to New York Stock Exchange. That's where George Washington was inaugurated. And in that case, we visualize we're taking people back in time and then helping them to see what we like standing in front of Federal Hall on that day.
It has been such an exciting spring. Our new nation's first electoral college has selected Revolutionary War General George Washington to be its first president. Rumor and notice of our war hero's pending arrival to New York City, now our nation's capital, has created a sense of...
Thank you, Yeet. And I should say that with the Peterson House example, one of the things that's great is that, you know, they had all of those primary sources that you can now allow your users to engage with up close and personally, right? So we had spoken earlier about artifacts behind the casings or other primary sources. Yeet said they could be artifacts. If you have historically relevant documents, you know, anything that you don't want people to touch, people can engage with those objects in those environments. And so for those of you who are feeling relatively brave, you know, you can create these interactive experiences yourself. So our favorite is Pano 2 VR. Pano 2 VR is something that you can buy. I think a license is about anywhere between $150 and $300 a month. And you can create these, you can design and embed these interactive objects inside of your own 360-degree environments. Alternatively, and we'll get to this at the back end of the presentation, for those of you who want to engage with us here at TimeLooper, we're offering to do all of this for all of our partners at absolutely no cost for free to create this content and then host it for the duration of the COVID crisis. And so if you're saying, hey, this is not my problem, I would love to make it your problem, or this is now my problem, I would love to make it your problem, we're more than happy to do that. And many partners have taken us up on that offer. But with regards to the actual interactive content inside of that environment, as I mentioned before, start from your place of strength. Already deploy what you have there in person. So one example here is the Henry Ford Museum in Michigan has a scavenger hunt that's designed for elementary school kids. These students are stuck at home and they're spending all day, every day, engaged with their teacher on Google Classrooms or like this in a Zoom environment. And they might have been planning on taking a field trip this spring to the Henry Ford. Well, now they can't do that. So one of the things that you could do is take that museum content and deploy it into the 360-degree environment where those students should or would have been consuming that content in any event, and then utilize those assets or translate those assets into interactivity. So what that really affords you is speed. You already have this content created. Take it, translate it, and embed it inside of these virtual environments. There's really no need here to reinvent the wheel. But you know, in many instances, particularly if you're a historic site or a public land, physical, you know, the power of virtual reality is that you can immerse people inside of these environments, but also relative physical location matters considerably. So in if you're thinking about a battlefield, for example, and you want to know who was where, and you know, these virtual reality experiences can be isolating. Part of what you might want to do is actually show how all of these different perspectives come together relationally. And so what we've now done is we've developed what we call this map platform, where you can allow your users to walk across a virtual map, and then when they get to that point on the map, to engage these individual pieces of content. So whether it's a battlefield, or whether it's a map of the US, or whether you're a regional park district, or you have a series of historic sites that are spread out across a city, we will build this map platform for you at absolutely no cost. And then we can deploy any range of content inside of this platform. So what will happen is somebody will walk to a certain point and it will trigger. And it will trigger either a 360-degree interactive panoramic guide like we showed. It can trigger a 360-degree VR video like we saw from the Edison House, or it can even trigger a 2D video. You might have in your exhibition or in your archives, a 60-minute video about that place. We could take it and we would probably want to trim it into a 2-minute video that's 2D, that when the individual is walking on the environment, that 2D experience can pop up. So to give you a sense of what this experience can look like and how your users can consume it from home with their hardware, I'm now going to pass it back to Yeet, who's going to show you an example of one of these platforms that we've already created for another partner. Yeet, you're on mute.
Now I'm going to try to visualize how this experience is working. Let me turn my camera and try to find it. All right. So here's the map. So now I'm going to share my screen and then walk in this space as I'm doing right now, my phone. So I can walk and get close to anything here. So let's do it from my app, my screen, so that you can have a better view.
Shimonoseki is a city with many stories to tell to her visitors. In some such stories, Shimonoseki played a supporting role. In others, she was the main actor, changing the course of history for the entirety of Japan. To hear her stories and witness her history unfold, start exploring by walking on the virtual map. Kyofu Town might be most famous for its gardens, ancient temples, and its glamorous beauty, but she has more.
So this map content is not necessarily only for natural parks. It's perfect for them, as you can see, is like a Grand Canyon example as an illustration on the picture. But you may have a museum, and then your artifacts might belong to the neighborhood, or even a broader geography. And then what we can do is you can tell the stories of your artifacts and their original locations. So this map functionality, map platform has multiple use cases for different type of institutions.
Thank you, Yeet. And from what you saw, that initial map exploration was something that Yeet facilitated, and then that orange pillar was what he walked to trigger that additional experience. So if you put 3, 4, 5 different pieces of content within your map platform to start, people can use their tablet device and walk around their living room while they're stuck at home, and in a really fun and interactive way engage with these different pieces of content. And it's worth noting that, again, these pieces of content can be from assets that you already have. They don't necessarily have to be pieces of content that get created. But in many instances, we're talking about, in all of these instances so far, we've been talking about what we would consider to be on-demand content. So whether it's Map, or it's the TimeLooper platform, or Facebook, or YouTube 360, or Vimeo, whether it's interactive or not interactive, photo or video, it's all content that people just download and consume. But really, there's another powerful approach that can be taken, which is where you continue to facilitate direct interaction with people from your community, right? So what we can do is we can take this map platform and we can allow your education specialist, your interpreter, to facilitate tours of these environments virtually, where all of the tour participants, in this case maybe it's students, where all of the students are sitting at home or standing at home walking through the platform. Your interpretive specialist is at home as well, and they're facilitating this virtual tour. So they can take these individual participants stop by stop. They can explain the topography, they can explain the historical significance and talk about the events that happen there. Now, the challenge with this VR conferencing platform, of course, is that um, it is not on demand, it's live, which means that it's not scalable. However, what we can do as well is we can record these VR sessions, and then you can upload them later to your VR platform where people can access them as on-demand content as well. So this is just a great tool for people to use, for institutions to use, if really what they're trying to solve for is, person-to-person engagement in their physical environments, where that's not really possible these days. So we've spoken about a bunch of different interpretive approaches that you all can take. And of course, the name of this webinar is Getting VR Tours Stood Up Quickly. So I just want to briefly, reinforce those things that could be done in a matter of days. If your goal is really to get a VR tour stood up by, within a week or a fortnight, the 360-degree photo or the 360-degree interactive pictures are where you're going to get the best interpretive bang for your buck. And in terms of immersiveness and effectiveness of communication of content with regards to speed. Whereas something like the 360-degree movie might take much longer to make, even though it might be more immersive. And a 360-degree photo is even easier to make because you could literally take it right now and upload it, but then you're really leaving it to people to sort of figure out on their own what it is that they're supposed to get out of these virtual experiences. One other thing that I want to mention is that once you've built this content, I like to say the work is halfway done, right? It's not enough to build it and then expect it to use it. This isn't Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come is not effective marketing. So one of the things that we recommend doing is thinking about where and how you typically engage your community and then facilitating outreach so that the individuals in your community become aware of and utilize these products. And depending upon the content journey that you're creating, that will have an impact on the channel that you choose to deploy it in. So for example, if you're focusing on education and you're going to create an educational content journey that's aligned around 8th graders coming to your site to examine a key concept this spring, then once you create that content, I would encourage you to reach out to all of those schools and all of those school groups that had already scheduled to come to your park and let them know, hey, we know that you're not allowed to come here for obvious reasons, but you can still facilitate a virtual tour with interpretive value for all of your students from the safety of their own home, and it's all free. Additionally, you could, put something on the web. Like our partner here on the left, their park is closed and it's in a big banner that's set up on their website, putting up a pop-up notification where people know that the park is closed, but there are these additional resources. Those are the kinds of things that you can do that will really drive quick penetration of these individual products. So just a couple of things I want to double down on before we wrap up and turn to Q&A. The first of which is with regards to best practices. So finding a partner that's going to keep their platform updated is really important. Whether you're using Google or TimeLooper, having that company that's going to worry about the technology so you don't have to is really important. A couple of years ago, the National Park Service at the National Mall developed an interpretive app. 6 months later, Apple pushed out an iOS update, and then the app stopped working. And then they never went through the effort of rebuilding that app again. So finding a platform where they're constantly taking care of that is one less thing for you to worry about. Secondly, start quickly. And you'll start quickly by starting with a discrete content journey, right? So typically we find that 3 to 5 experiences is enough to be comprehensive, but not so much that it's going to be a big lift for you to actually develop. And then, of course, I would say on this point, think of it more like old-fashioned TV and less like Netflix. You don't have to deliver and dump all of your content at once. You can actually serially engage your customers by starting with 3, 4, 5 experiences, and then in a week or 2 weeks, pushing out subsequent pieces of content. This COVID crisis could go on for quite a while, and people are going to need to find new things to do as they go. So if you get stuff out now and then you sort of engage in drip marketing downstream, it both gives you time to create more content, but it also gives you time to get feedback from your users on those first pieces of content, and it will allow them to stay engaged with you, as the crisis continues and hopefully unwinds itself. Third, as we mentioned with the case of the Henry Ford, don't just create content to create content. Don't take a 360 photo and then think about what you want to do with it. Start with the interpretive journey. This is a customer segment that I have. This is their pain point, and here's how I'm going to create that content. And then, of course, you don't need a headset. You need a smartphone, as Yeet showed you, or a tablet device. And then finally, start quickly, fail quickly, and iterate. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. As I mentioned before, our communities are being very understanding these days. If you've never done this before, it's going to give them all more reason to engage with you, appreciate you, and give positive feedback. So if you don't feel that working through Facebook and Pano2 VR and YouTube 360 are for you, we're supporting all of you, all of our partners throughout this crisis, absolutely free. And for those of you who know us, you know that there are no strings attached. So from the content development to the content deployment, whether it's on the TimeLooper app or if you want a walkable map of your own, which is your own application with your own custom branding, if you want the VR conferencing and tour functionality, we can get all of that built and give it all to you, so that way you can facilitate ongoing relationships and engage with your community. If what you want is interactive panoramic guides like we showed from East Bay Regional Park District or Ford's Theater, those can be up within a week. If you want a walkable map, that too can be up within a week. It's all very simple. We try to make it as simple for you as possible. We will do all of the work, and then the hope is to give you tools that you can utilize to deploy out with your community. And so with that, I guess I will pause here and see if, and I will say that later, here are the links to all of the resources that I referred to today. And so this will all be available on that PDF that's on our website in a couple of hours. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to hit the questions tab on the bottom and then type it in, and we'll go from there. There is one that has already come in. Let me see what this says. Here it is. All right, first question is, can you talk about the longevity of the app and intellectual property? Yi, do you want to talk about longevity of VR technology and how these people should be thinking about it?
Yeah. So virtual reality has two components. Three components actually. The first one is the content. The second one is the software that plays the content, and the third one is the hardware that that enables the view experience. So the content is content. We still consume content like movies from 1950s, 40s is the same thing. The content is evergreen, just taking different shapes and forms so that they're more immersive. The software needs to be updated. As long as it's up to date, it works all the time. Just like Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, they're all up to date. So since this program, in our case, this program is shared across all the platforms, it is like posting your picture on Facebook. So that's one of the reasons actually we can offer our service for free, because we already developed the engine. It's already being used. We will be just adding your content on this platform. Hardware is the part that is that gets old, that you may need to change in the long term. For example, 2 years ago, even maybe a year and a half ago, Pearl Harbor, one of our customers, for on-site operations, they were using Samsung Gear VR. Each unit is $1,500. Today, you have the hardware cost is $150, and it is 10 times a better experience because it's optimized for this solution. So when you are choosing your service provider, make sure that your content, the platform, is compatible with all the devices in the market, so that when a new hardware comes in place, and then you can, it's like seamless switch. You just like push it to that app. And also make sure that it works on across different platforms. Like in TimeLooper case, it works on an iPad, it works on an iPhone, it works on an Android, it works on Oculus, or on any other devices. So flexibility is important when it comes to hardware. Make sure that your software is used by major parks. Is like check out what other clients are using it to make sure that it always stays up to date. Like in our case, Pearl Harbor, Pompeii, in Japan, in Hong Kong, all these places are already using. And then don't worry about the content. Content will live forever.
Great, thank you, Yeet. 2 additional questions have just come in. The first one is regarding the live VR tours. I assume these can be built so the interpreter delivering them does so remotely, i.e. is not in the same physical space as the museum or site. That is correct. The interpreter can be absolutely anywhere in the world, and they will be participating virtually, just like all of the attendees to that virtual conference. Next question, Yeet, this one I'll throw over to you. So this is from somebody that we know well. Is it possible for the app to exist within an existing museum or public land or site's existing app infrastructure, or does it have to be embedded within TimeLooper?
So specifically for this map platform, you can imagine this as you will go to Google Earth, and then you will give us the coordinates, and then we will transform that, we will take that area and then bring this augmented reality map into life. Then the next thing is there's an engine that allows you to walk on this map while keeping the resolution high and trigger. So all this sophisticated engine is not compatible with all the apps in the market. So which means that while let's say that you are a National Park Service Grand Canyon app, and then you click on this experience and then it launches seamlessly. So it cannot work because unless National Park Service or that specific parks app has Unity connection, we are building it on Unity platform. And most of the apps don't have that. However, this is what we are offering is going to be your branded app. So it's not going to be a TimeLooper app, but we will be deploying on our engine so that it works all the time, but it is your branded app. Also, which means that you can put links between those 2 apps. Let's say that a National Park Service app, you are consuming the content, and then you can put a link, and then that link calls the other app, and then that app launches. It's kind of, I don't know if you are using it, but like using Google Maps and Uber. So when you're on Uber, you see the Uber and then you click, it opens the Uber app. Or on Facebook, if you want to use the Messenger on your smartphone, you click on the Messenger, messages type, and then it opens another app. So it works seamlessly. So at the end of the day, what we can do is you have 2 apps, their look and feel branding is the same, but they are not in the same app. They are 2 separate apps connected in a different way. You are on mute.
Great, thanks, Yeet. So another question that we have is that one of our partners who's participating today is attempting to develop digital programming for a fee in order to offset some of what's been lost in canceling face-to-face programming. Does anybody have any thoughts? Nick or Yeet have any thoughts on how we can help them to generate revenue from these products?
There are 2 ways that this is what we are hearing from our other partners. So one is after building this platform and then map. So today, no one is charging anything to anyone, and then all the teachers and parents, everybody is struggling. But once you build this and then share this, even in the short term, very quickly, after they touch and feel and play with it, then next year, this can be part of a paid experience, whether they consume this at school or on your site in your visitor center. And then on this map, you can add more, a different type of content. It's kind of, you can think about it as the premium, accessing private content, spatial content, more interactive content. That is option 1. The other option is this live virtual reality conferences. Imagine you have the map, and your ranger, your historian, your interpreter is joining sessions and running sessions for different type of audience. This could be schools, universities, colleges, or maybe other naturalists around the world, or even maybe for big conferences. You can, maybe if your team cannot join, but they can participate as in these virtual environments. So those are, you imagine this first launch product as a teaser for all of your audiences, and while solving for a big problem, and then you can charge them on different type of content. Like imagine this is being your own Netflix, and then you give some of them free, and then you charge others, and then whether it's different type of content or through VR, private VR conferencing, virtual conferencing.
Okay, 2 new questions have come in. First, I have heard that captioning or hearing impaired visitors and audio description can be very problematic for 360-degree images and video. Can we meet our legal requirements with this technology? I will answer that question. So I will say that for virtual and augmented reality, WCAG standards, which are the best practices around accessibility, do not apply typically. And they do not apply because WCAG is principally designed for websites and not for virtual environments. Now, that being said, TimeLooper has worked particularly with California state parks to create as close to fully accessible solutions for augmented and virtual reality as possible, recognizing that there are very serious limitations for those with visual impairments. For those with audible impairments, subtitles do the trick. And there are a couple of different places in which there are a couple of different ways in which you can do that. The first of which is one of the things that happens is in these virtual environments, as you move around the screen, the subtitles stay at the bottom of your field of vision. So you are not rotating away from the subtitles. The other thing that we can do is we can provide a transcript of what they otherwise would hear in the virtual environment inside of an app-based UI. So for example, if you're using the tablet and you're about to launch a map experience, we could provide a transcript of what they will see in subtitles. Same thing happens inside of the TimeLooper app. So those are a couple of the different workarounds that we have developed for those with audible impairments. Does that answer the question? Next question. So all of this seems amazing. Our institution is new to VR and runs on a very small budget. What is the pricing after the COVID crisis? Also for the viewer, does TimeLooper app require a subscription? So again, at least through July 31st, everything is free. So if nothing else, develop something, put it online, see how your users, feel about it, allow them to experience it. And then on July 31st, if the COVID crisis is ongoing, you have our commitment that we're then going to push the ball further down the field and give you a little bit more running room to be able to do all of this at no charge for your users. After COVID, TimeLooper's pricing is $499 a month for the software licensing, but we typically charge also for developing all of the content. All of you are getting all of the content development for free now. So that is a cost that you would not have to realize. Now, we do have partners who say, look, we have to go out there and raise a grant, but we really want to do this. We wouldn't discontinue your software licenses or your services while you're out there raising funds if it's something that you want to use. We can also do one-time annual payments if that's something that works better with your budget cycle and provide discounts for that. So some partners will say, look, that is just cost prohibitive and we can't stomach it. And then we say, well, what can you stomach, or what is your financial reality? And let's find a way to make it work for you. We want this product and these interpretive tools to be accessible for a site that gets 500 visitors, 500,000 visitors, a site that monetizes by charging $20 whenever anybody comes in the door, and a site that's free. So we'll work with you to try to find a way to make it accessible within your financial realities. So
I think that there's a second part to that question. I guess the question is there a fee for the end user?
Right. That's right. That's right. And so for the end user, the answer depends, and it depends upon you, right? So some of our partners, like somebody asked in the previous question, they want to generate revenue from this. So in those instances, they actually charge for they actually charge to access the content. You could charge whatever you want. You could charge $1.99. You could charge $20. It doesn't matter. But we do not impose a cost on the end user. That's a decision that you, the institution, make. Next question. Can we speak about the average cost for development of the content? The answer is, unfortunately, it depends. And it depends upon the type of content that you want to create. If you want to create an immersive interactive experience where you're walking on the deck of the USS Arizona on the morning of December 7th as Japanese dive bombers are, surrounding you, the cost for something like that could be well north of $50,000. If you're talking about the development of a simple interactive panoramic guide where you have all the primary sources and you have the audio files that you want to provide for voiceover, it's probably just going to be a couple of $1,000s and not much more than that. And then, there's a huge range for everything in between. Let me see. There's another question. Open question. I am a teacher and I love doing VR with my high school students. I sometimes run into my own technology issues due to not knowing enough. Where would I start with a walking map of the area in Japan that was hit by the atomic bomb? Do you want to answer that one?
Yeah. So for that one, so development will be happening on our end, which means that it's very difficult for you to create this map and this experience, but you can share your vision and then we can make it happen. But also, we have a lot of World War II content already through our National Mall partnership with National Park Service or Pearl Harbor. And currently we are working with Hiroshima, Peace Park, and Nagasaki to create more content for them. So these are all, we are creating all of these for on-site experience primarily, but now like everything is evolving also for distance learning. Maybe you can check out our app and then those kind of experiences under Pearl Harbor and then National Mall. And if you email us, I can also direct you to those content. Maybe you can start by using already created content. Like Pearl Harbor, for example, you are walking on the deck of USS Arizona right before the attack. And at National Mall, the World War II Memorial tells the story of how US got involved into the war. And then we have primary source interviews inside the experience. I think that would be a great immersive start. And then over time, as we create more assets, you can just pull in and use it in your classroom.
So next question from this teacher is, so your stuff is online and it goes into Google Classroom? Question mark. So no, our software platform does not directly integrate into Google Classroom. For those of you who are thinking about how to get your content out into classrooms, some of the challenges include that some institutions have a device for every student. Other institutions are less resourced and don't have any devices at all for students. And some institutions have for the school a class of high-end VR headsets. For each of those institutions, we have a deployment method that we recommend. So obviously, for the one device per student institutions, it's pretty simple. Each device has to have your app or the TimeLooper app downloaded onto it, and then you could either facilitate station-based learning or concurrent usage by all of the students inside of the classroom. For other institutions that only have what the teacher brings in every day, well, you can launch the experience on your tablet device or on your smartphone, connect your smartphone or tablet to the classroom projector, and then allow a student to drive the experience, and they'll see it on their tablet, and then everybody else inside of the classroom will experience it on the projector.
Yeah, and then also right now, as all of us, my kids, I have two kids, 3rd grade and 5th grade, they are using Google Classroom online learning. And what the teachers are doing right now is they are giving different assignments for students to go and check out. Like these are like YouTube videos, or now, of course, my school is using telling students to download app and then watch this content and write an article about it. So it is not in Google Classroom, but teachers are finding ways and integrating this content and then making part of their curriculum today. So the second that you have your site is live or you want to use any of the content, you can start using it that way.
All right, so it's 1 o'clock. We want to be mindful of those of you who have other things to do. So please feel free to drop off and get back in touch with us if you liked anything that you've heard, or if you want help uploading this content onto some of those public platforms. For others of you who have questions, we're more than happy to stick around and answer them. But I don't see any other questions. So, oh, there's another one. Where do we get the PDF? So I will share my screen. Okay, desktop here. So in an hour or so, you'll go to TimeLooper's website. And then in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a red link that is COVID-19 webinars. And then this right here highlights upcoming webinars. And then you'll see the webinars archive, and it will sit directly here above at the top of the webinars archive, and you'll be able to access all of this content. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We appreciate your taking the time. We know that these are unusual days, and you're all quite busy and trying to get accustomed to the new normal. But we mean it sincerely when we say we're here for you. So any questions that you have, we are more than happy to answer them. If you need recommendations from us on hardware, software platforms, anything else that we can do to help, just feel free to reach out, and we'll do our best to support you. So thank you very much, and have a good day.